Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and finish up Chapter 9 today as we finish up leadership communication. Today we're going to be looking at the idea of channels, and we're also going to be looking at verbal and nonverbal communication. Now, what's a channel? A channel is a medium by which a communication message is carried from sender to receiver. For instance, what I'm doing right now is a channel. I'm communicating to you through an electronic medium, which is this computer, but I'm also communicating verbally to you. It's not written or emailed to you or whatever, so the channel is the way in which that message is conveyed. Now, channel richness is the amount of information that can be transmitted during a communication episode. That's back and forth. You have one-way communication, which is what we're doing right now, me talking to you, but there's very little dialogue that takes place as we interact with this technology. So channel richness involves how much information that is able to be transmitted and received and reciprocated during the communication episode. Now, Exhibit 9.6 is a continuum of channel richness, and if you take a look here at the extreme left, you see the low channel richness, and that might be a formal report. The disadvantages to it: it's impersonal, it's one way, it's sending usually a written type of communication to someone, and feedback is slow. This is why traditional organizations who have a bureaucratic structure with many hierarchies and leadership is centralized at the top, this is why most of them aren't successful anymore, because it takes forever for your communication, which is usually a written request or a report, to make it through all the channels or all the hierarchies in that organization to get to the decision maker. And then once the decision maker has that information, it takes time to get back down to the people who initiated it in the first place. So you have very slow feedback when it comes to a low channel richness in the form, in this case, of a formal report. However, it does have advantages. You do have a written record. You have a paper trail. Oftentimes, that is the saving grace of these types of channels. It's premeditated. That means you have a chance to proofread. You have a chance to verify and confirm what it is you want to communicate before it's sent. When you talk, and oftentimes if you are not very careful, you can misspeak, and once it's said, you can't get it back. But it's easily disseminated. That means it can go through different channels. You just distribute it out. You get a little less formal with memos and letters. Those are still written, but they're not as formal going up all through the hierarchies to the top. You also have email and text messaging and the internet. That's also a less than rigid and formal style of communicating. But still in all, it's a one-way proposition. You email that person or you text that person. Now today, well, I say today, it's been going on for a while. Our younger generation, that's how they communicate, through texting. And they have different symbols and abbreviations and all of that to indicate how they're saying things and what they're saying and all of that. I'm not as adept at that as they are, or maybe you may be. But it is a popular form of communication today. Email is popular, but I believe with the instant communication that text messaging brings, they prefer that, the younger people at least, and maybe the older people, to everything else. Telephone, just get up and call the person. Now telephones, I rarely see telephones being used for the purpose that they were intended for, at least to the degree that it's being misused today. Telephones are pretty much devices that give you everything but voice communication. Now, we still receive calls, don't get me wrong, but we have apps for everything on our phone. We text, and that's a very quick way of communicating, and I think that may be the advantage and the reason why we don't talk as much. And for some of us who are challenged with attention deficit and all of that, we want to get to the point. We don't want to stay on the phone. In fact, for me personally, if I'm talking to you more than 2 or 3 minutes on the phone, unless it's something that is very, very important, I'm tuning you out. So few of us have a lot of patience when it comes to telephone communication. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, which is face-to-face verbal. And that's the two-way. It's personal, and you have fast feedback. Once it's said, you can receive the input from others that they received it, and this is high channel richness. Disadvantage is that there's no record of that verbal communication. It's your word against that person's unless you have a witness. It is spontaneous. Sometimes you may speak, and as the old saying goes, you may put your foot in your mouth. You may say things that you wish you hadn't have said. And then dissemination is hard. I can speak to a person face to face, but if I want to disseminate it, I've got to go to everybody I want that communication to go to and go through the same routine of talking to them just as I've talked to the first person. Now, the characteristics that influence the richness of an information channel: you're able to handle multiple cues simultaneously. Again, that goes with verbal communication would be the easiest. You have rapid two-way feedback, and you can establish a personal focus for that communication. Now, the face-to-face discussion is the richest, and as we've said before, it allows you to pick up on a lot of things. For instance, if you text someone and ask them, "How are you doing today?" and they text you back, "I'm fine," well, you would assume that they're fine. But what if you went up to that person and saw them face to face and asked the same question, "How are you doing today?" and they respond, "I'm fine," or use facial expressions that are angry or upset or sad, and then say it in a way that kind of gives you the indication that they're really not fine. These come from your ability to see, to interact face to face with people, and you can pick up on those cues where you wouldn't be able to in the more rigid and structured channel depleted types of communication. And then telephone conversations, the voice gives the emotional information, so that's why they give it a fairly good rating. Electronic messaging, we've talked about that. Print media, you can personalize it, and you can put written cues in there, and the disadvantage is that it provides slow feedback. And today, with business the way it is, that can be fatal. You need quick communication. You need quick feedback to know how things are going and how people are taking your product, your service, and so forth. Now, routine and non-routine messages, that's pretty straightforward. They're simple, routine messages. They convey data or statistics, and they provide efficient communication, and it goes through channels that are lower in richness, like a report. Non-routine deals with issues that could be misunderstood. They're characterized by time pressure and surprise, and you should use for non-routine channels or for messages, you should use rich channels. For instance, if you have a problem come up that you haven't had to deal with, you may want to talk to the person face to face instead of trying to convey a report, especially if it's, time sensitive, if it catches you by surprise, if it's complex in nature, or if it deals with problems or stuff that you need to address right away, you want to be able to probably just see them face to face or at least by phone. Redundant communication or messages of high importance can be sent using more than one channel. It adds weight to the message and keeps the issue at the top of people's mind. So with redundant communication, these are really communiques that you can send text, voice, telephone, what have you. Now, tips for effective use, really, when you're using electronic communication channels, you can combine high-tech and high-touch. Consider the circumstances. Think twice before sending the message. These are just basic rules that should be common knowledge. And the disadvantages: it contributes to poor communication in many organizations, increases potential for communication errors, and deprives people of human moments. So again, it's kind of like what we've talked about. The technology gets the information quicker. You can disseminate it broader than just using the telephone or face-to-face. However, you do lose that advantage of seeing nuances and cues and things like that people can pick up on that may make the difference between them receiving the message as intended or misinterpreting the message. Now, nonverbal communication is body language, transmitted through action and behavior. If you want an example of nonverbal communication, cut someone off on 240, and I'm sure they'll catch up to you and give you all kinds of nonverbal communication, body language communication. But these are things that you can use your body to use to communicate information. Again, when someone says, "I'm fine," if they say it with a smile and there's just a peaceful expression on their face, you can pretty much believe that they're fine. But if they are angry, a furrowed brow, saying, "I'm fine," that may indicate that the person may not be fine. So those nonverbal cues you can pick up on, and sometimes they speak more than just what the verbal cues can say. Now, current communication channels, social media, that's a big thing today. I'm sure everybody who has a phone or any type of internet access has social media, or they've at least been exposed to it. So that's getting to be a growing issue, especially when it comes to hiring. People are looking at social media pages to determine what kind of person you are. So social media, for the good and the bad, is a big tool. Challenges: developing skills for communicating in a crisis. Now, here at Mid-America, we have, for instance, a communication system so that if there's a crisis, we have a way of being able to communicate. But what if your company or what if your church doesn't have that? You need to be able to develop a communication protocol for any type of situation that may come up. Now, social media, internet-based applications, all of these things allow the creation and sharing of user-generated content. So, again, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all of these things, Wikipedia or wikis and blogs, these are all ways that people can communicate. And the biggest challenge to me for this is managing it all, being able to contain it, and making sure that accurate and truthful information is disseminated. And then crisis ready. Again, be calm, be visible and supportive, tell the truth, and communicate a vision for the future.